Okay.
And I could see Darlie Routier standing in the back of the house in the family room, talking on the telephone.
Oh my God! Oh my God! Oh shit! Oh my God!
One of the boys is laying on the floor, and he looks up at us. He's got his eyes open, and he's trying to breathe. I told her that she needed to help him, but she just wouldn't help him. Told her to get some towels and try to stop the bleeding, and she never tried to help him.
I'm crouched down by Devin, looking up and seeing this police officer, and when he looks at me, he has a deer in the headlight look on his face. Well, I'm yelling at him and wanting him to help, you know.
Why would he be yelling at Waddell to help when Darlie is standing right next to them? She should be down helping Damon. Darren knew that she wasn't going to help. He had said that she was over helping him with Devin. Why would he ask Waddell for help? Because Darlie wasn't helping.
You know, pointing at Damon and saying, you know, give him CPR, and he didn't move.
Because he couldn't move. All right? He was not able to be down giving first aid if he felt like there was an intruder still in that house.
Starting with Waddell and the 911 call, there's a definite effort to classify Darlie as a non-caring mother.
Look at this idiot. This is crime fighter, Lloyd Harrell. He's an ex-FBI agent. He doesn't get the case. He's the guy that said that he's the guy that initially had everybody believing that an intruder snuck out the front door, even though we had Gorsuch over there watching. All right?
Anything that can possibly be used against Darlie, the prosecution just tossed it out there.
They didn't toss it out there. She was just standing there not helping. That's a fact. That's not something that they could just use against her. That is a fact. You heard it from Darren just a second ago. I asked him to help. Why didn't he tell Darlie to help? Why? Because he knew she wasn't going to. It all goes to, why did he have to run across the street to get Karen? He said, because I needed help. I needed help. Darlie was not helping him.
Under our criminal justice system, every defendant starts out with the presumption of innocence. That person sitting at the counsel table, they are innocent of the crime charged, period, until
proven guilty.
The jury decides beyond a reasonable doubt that they're guilty.
If any one thing convinced the public there was something wrong with this woman, it was a silly string tape party.
No, it wasn't. The silly string tape, if you take that away, let's just take it away. All right? Even though the way that Barb Davis writes this in Precious Angels, and what I'm going to do this. I'm going to structure this in a certain way where I can read this entire book that I've had sitting. I read it once years ago, and I've had it sitting. And that now it's getting to me as to why Barb Davis would change her mind. Right? I've already found 2 different parts in this book where she describes the bruises that she said she never got to see. 2 different parts. One is on page 118, another's on page 136. She said she didn't see them. Right? And she is describing this whole scenario with the silly string for word. She's describing it. She even told us what store Dana bought this stuff at. She talks about how Darren is standing there with his hands in his pockets. And when Darlie starts spraying that silly string, he just can't believe it. He takes a couple steps back and just shakes his head at her. I noticed that years ago before I read this book. Watch him.
Greg Davis played that video for the jury, and he says, here's a woman who has just lost her children, and she's literally dancing on their graves.
She wasn't doing any dancing, but she sure was singing and happy.
I didn't think that there was anything wrong with it, and I still don't think there was anything wrong with that. People can say what they want to say about that, but that was nothing more than me being able to tell Devin happy birthday.
Me being able to tell Devin happy. You being able. How in the fuck can you be able after your kids have been killed just 8 days before that? That's what people don't buy. You were able to do that.
There's many ways to mourn the loss of a child or parent, but having a birthday party and throwing silly string around in a graveyard, I found it very repulsive.
That's right. And I know this lady. She's in our groups. And we get to hear from her for a while, every now and then.
That she would do that. They would have loved this. No, they wouldn't have loved this, because if it hadn't been for you, they wouldn't be in that spot.
That's right. They would have loved this. They would have loved to be in the ground, looking up and not being able to participate while you spray silly string on their dead bodies. They love this.
In the first place.
The prosecution has been on a roll here. Not anymore. The lawyers for the state have been knocked back by a big surprise sprung by the woman's lawyer, Doug Mulder. Mulder put the lead case investigator, Rowlett Police Detective Jimmy Patterson, on the witness stand.
He put Jim Patterson on. Mulder put him on the stand for a reason. It was a defense strategy. He was going to accuse him of a crime that actually was not a crime, because there is no expectation of privacy when you're in a public place. That is law, and it's still law today. It's always been law. But what he wanted to do was put on a show. He wanted to put on a show and say, look here, this guy pled the fifth. But he only pled the fifth on that subject, not on any other subject. Doug Mulder was playing the strategy on this because he had nothing else. Why do you think he did not enter in the 45-minute prayer service? Why do you think he didn't let that be talked about? Because there's nothing there. He even says that there was no substance to it.
Why do you want to call Detective Patterson as a defense witness?
Well, you ask Detective Patterson or come back Monday and you'll find out. I wanted to call him today.
He's going to be a pretty hostile witness to you, though, isn't he?
Well, I don't know if he's hostile now. He might be hostile when I'm through with him.
The defense was about to reveal a bombshell about the tactics of the police with a piece of evidence that had not been revealed.
This is part of the actual tape. Mama Key has the whole tape. She has been promising to put that out for years, and she hasn't. But she wanted to give it for this. Doug Mulder felt that that tape didn't have any substance. That's what he said.
They started to testify about some of the things that they knew. And when Detective Patterson was questioned as to a memorial service that was held for the boys,
And he says, I'm not going to talk about that. I take the Fifth Amendment.
No. He didn't say, I'm not going to talk about the memorial service. He didn't say it that way either. He didn't say, I'm not talking about that. I'm going to take the Fifth. No, that was after the judge said, hey, we're getting it, because Mulder said, you're going to jail for that, for placing that surveillance tape. And that's not what he said. This is a damn lie.
my jaw almost dropped. I'd never, in 20 years, ever heard a detective taking the Fifth Amendment.
In 20 years, have you ever seen a defense attorney accuse a detective of a federal crime? Have you ever seen that while he's in the courtroom?
Patterson, faced with this issue, took the Fifth Amendment and would not testify.
Yep, he would not testify on that subject alone, and it was after the judge suggested that he get counsel and he take the Fifth. The judge suggested it. The judge knew what was up. Any of us, when we're accused of a crime, we have the right to not testify against ourselves. He was being accused of a crime, which turned out not to be a crime.
We called his second detective, and he takes the Fifth Amendment and won't testify.
What they're not telling you is when they called Chris Frosch the next day, I believe, he had obtained an attorney because he knew they were going to accuse him of a crime. And under his attorney's advice, he took the Fifth Amendment too, only on that subject. They are trying to bullshit us and trick us with this show.
These are the lead investigators, and the state has not called them. Why is that?
The state hadn't called him yet. He wanted to put Waddell on the stand first to show Darlie's behavior. And look how they pixelate this and make that wound look worse than what it really is.
The reason prosecutors didn't call Patterson to the stand, there was a moment that few knew about. A memorial that took place before the silly string video.
That morning, the police set up surveillance and mic'd the grave for sound and had a camera in a van nearby recording activities in this memorial service. And apparently they thought somebody was going to stand over the children and confess.
It's happened before at funerals. It has happened before where they get an excited utterance. That's what it's called. And they slip up. And they were hoping to catch something like that, but they didn't.
The issue here is, did they illegally place recording devices at the gravesite?
But it wasn't illegal.
And so...
Notice in the last defense, when the family didn't know that everybody was going to be there filming, that there is not a flower there, there's not a car there, there's not a toy there. We've seen many pictures over the years where there is nothing there for those boys.
The question became, was this a legal act? Ultimately, the cops were not charged with any.
That's Dana walking up right there. She goes, I brought some snaps, I brought some silly string, but you can't have them until Mommy and Daddy get here. That's caught on tape. This is part of the surveillance tape.
A crime for the recording devices at the gravesite.
We had scheduled a prayer service at the cemetery, and we prayed and we cried and we loved each other.
Darlie just sitting there holding Drake while everybody else is praying and crying.
Rowlett investigators basically planted a wire.
That's Detective Jimmy Patterson. That's Detective Chris Frosch. Chris Frosch, she described the intruder as looking like him.
They may have violated federal law.
They may have not, and they knew they didn't. They were in a public setting. We know what the law is. They asked permission from the owners of the gravesite to put it there. And they were in public, just like today when you see these First Amendment auditors. You have the right to film anything that your eyes can see in public. You can't do it on private property, though.
By doing that, because people at a gravesite have a reasonable expectation of privacy.
Absolutely, they do not, because they're in public, and that's what the court determined.
Father, we pray that you put a hedge around this family and protect them. Father, may this day...
That's Darlie sitting there on the ground while everybody else is praying.
When you take the fifth, it means you have some culpability somewhere, or you're afraid you do.
They took the fifth because they were accused of that crime. That's why they took the fifth. They came back to court, and they both had attorneys, and the suggestion was that they will speak on anything else in the case except for that. Until it went through, they took them to court. Darlie Key tried to sue the city of Rowlett, the Rowlett Police Department, and Jimmy Patterson and Chris Froush personally. And the court said no. Because the law, look up the law. As a form of expression, photography is protected in the U.S. by the First Amendment right to the Constitution. When in public spaces where you are lawfully present, you have a First Amendment right to photograph anything that is in plain view. That includes pictures of federal buildings, transportation facilities, and police. See, we can film the police, but are the police not supposed to film us? The law is so much more clear now than it was back in '96, because you have all these First Amendment auditors that are going out on YouTube and all that. And the law always says, no, you are allowed to film the police. They are in public. So many people's rights have been violated by police because they're being filmed. The cop can't take your camera. He can't arrest you. He can't even ask you for ID if you're doing that. Back in '96, it was kind of iffy because you didn't have YouTube. You didn't have people doing this. Most people don't know this. They know you can't be outside publicly drunk. They know that you can't even carry an open container of an alcoholic beverage. These are known laws. They know you can't walk around naked in public. There's no sign needed to remind them. But they don't know about the right to photograph anything that can be seen in public. And there is no expectation of privacy in a public place. You can even stand on a public sidewalk and film into a private area, as long as you're standing on the public sidewalk. A photographer, video crew, anyone can photograph you, and no consent is needed. No one is required to even let you know they're recording you. No one has a right to prohibit their image from being created. Not if you're famous, that's why you have paparazzi. Not if you're religious, not if you're shy, not if you just don't want them to, not if you're having a bad day, not if you tell them not to, not if you're the president of the U.S., CEO of a major corporation, or head of your household. Kids too, without parents, with or without parents in the photograph. Even without their permission, photography is legal. There is no expectation of privacy in public, kids included. If you don't want your kids to be filmed out in public, that's why sometimes people on YouTube go, oh my God, you're filming kids. Your kids are in the public. Don't be an idiot. No person creating imagery is required to stop when you enter their view, or your kids. Your pets do everything, and everyone is fair game, even if it can be seen from a public place. Even inside your house. If someone wants to photograph you through the windows, you have the right to close the blinds to create privacy. But you don't have the right to stop someone from photographing anything they can see while in public view. That is law. All right, but back in '96, it was kind of iffy.
Had done was illegal.
That evidence was never presented.
And Detective Patterson was afraid that what they had done was illegal.
He wasn't afraid of it, but he wasn't sure what the law was. It was kind of iffy, right? Because Rest Haven is private property, but it's still public, and they had permission from the owners. So he wasn't sure. So he took the fifth. He actually never admitted to being the one that placed that there. And then when they took it to court later, the law stood for what was right, and you have no expectation. And to this day, and even before that, you have, well, you know, how do you think that these entertainers feel when they're out just trying to go to the store or something? People come running up filming them. They've been doing that forever. You can't turn around and sue them. You can't lock them up and throw them in jail for that. It was just, they weren't sure. And Mulder played that to a T.
That evidence was never presented. The jury never saw that. You have to.
The jury did see that. The jury did see them take the fifth because I asked Rena Way about that. He knew about it.
To wonder what would have happened if jurors had seen the other video that showed another side of Darlie.
It doesn't show another side of Darlie. It shows Darlie sitting there, and it's probably Dana or Danelle crying. Sitting on the ground while everybody else is up with their head down praying.
Particularly in a close case, jurors want to see the defendant take the witness stand.
The word was out. The mother accused would take the witness stand. The people came and they kept coming until the courtroom was packed.
All of that stuff that had been out about what she had said and done already needed to be answered. There's always been a lot of discussion about the decision to have Darlie testify.
Darlie's decision to take the stand at trial, in hindsight, probably was not a good idea.
It wasn't a good idea. Toby Shook said that she was the best witness they had. Rena Way told me that Darlie was on the stand for a moment, and then all of a sudden they had the jurors go back. And when they came back out, that Darlie was crying and upset because they think that Mulder chewed her ass. I think Mulder called for a slight recess and chewed her ass for getting up on that stand. And then she didn't cry anymore. And she also verified to me that they made sure that there was a large picture of Devin and Damon when they knew she was going to take the stand. A large picture of Devin and Damon was facing Darlie. They were hoping to get a reaction from her. And they didn't get it. Rena Way told me that when they came back after a few minutes of being back, when Darlie took the stand, then Mulder went up and said something to the judge. Then they sent him back for a minute. And when they came back out, Darlie was upset, crying. Because a lot of us don't know that, and I wouldn't have known it if I not interviewed her. But she told me that when she saw Darlie crying, that she came off the jury stand and handed Darlie a tissue and gave Darlie a tissue. And she caught a lot of flack for that. And I asked her, I said, why'd you do that? She said, well, I felt sorry for her. I mean, she was crying. I didn't want to see her crying. This last defense is so full of shit.